It was a bright afternoon when the marketplace was full of life. The air was thick with the smell of roasted corn, fresh fruits, and the sweat of people rushing from stall to stall. Vendors shouted to catch the attention of buyers. Children ran around with laughter echoing in the distance, and beggars sat quietly by the sides, hoping for a kind soul to drop a few coins. Among all the noise and movement, one figure stood out: the millionaire. He was a tall man dressed in an expensive suit that looked different from the ordinary clothes around him. His shoes shined even under the dusty road, and his watch gleamed in the sun. People recognized him instantly. Some admired him from afar, whispering about his wealth and power. Others lowered their heads, too shy to even look at him directly. He was known as one of the richest men in the city, someone who could buy anything he wanted. Yet his face carried a shadow of sadness, something most people never dared to speak about. As he walked through the crowd, some beggars stretched out their hands, asking for help. Usually he would pass by quickly, avoiding eye contact. Money could solve so many problems, but his heart carried a burden that no amount of gold or silver could fix. Deep inside, he thought of his daughter, the one person he loved more than his riches. She had been unable to walk since childhood. Doctors from every corner of the world had tried, but no one succeeded. The pain of watching her confined to a chair was heavier than all the treasures he owned. Just then, out of nowhere, a small voice called out to him. Sir, wait." The millionaire turned, slightly annoyed, thinking it was another beggar asking for food or coins. Standing before him was a thin boy, barefoot, his clothes torn at the edges. His face was sunburnt and his hair messy, but his eyes were unusual. They did not look like the eyes of a helpless beggar. They were bright, almost shining, filled with confidence and courage. "Please, sir, listen to me," the boy said firmly. The millionaire sighed. "What is it, boy?" "I don't have time." The boy looked straight into his eyes without fear and spoke words that made the ground shake beneath the millionaire's feet. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." For a moment the millionaire froze. The noise of the market seemed to fade away. He stared at the boy, unable to believe what he had just heard. His heart skipped a beat, and his mind rushed back to the years of pain, the countless nights of tears, the endless visits to hospitals. Every memory of his daughter struggling to move even an inch came flooding back. The boy stood quietly, waiting for his reply. He did not blink, nor did he look away. He spoke as if he was absolutely certain of his words. The millionaire's lips trembled, but no sound came out at first. Then he finally whispered, "What did you just say?" The boy repeated with the same calmness, "I can make your daughter walk again." The millionaire felt anger rising inside him. How dare a beggar boy speak of something so impossible? Was this some cruel joke? Yet at the same time, a strange feeling began to stir deep inside his heart. Something about the boy's voice, the way he stood with confidence, made it hard to simply walk away. People in the market had started to notice. Some watched in curiosity, whispering to one another. They knew about the millionaire's daughter, and they could not believe that a poor child dared to speak about her condition so boldly. The millionaire looked closely at the boy. His clothes were ragged, but his spirit was unbroken. There was no trace of doubt in his eyes. In that moment, the millionaire's emotions clashed inside him. Pain, anger, disbelief, and a small flicker of hope he tried so hard to bury. He stood there, frozen in place, his heart pounding louder than the noise of the crowd. It was as if time itself had stopped. The boy said nothing more. He simply waited with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the truth. And the millionaire, though powerful and rich, found himself shaken by the words of a pauper boy he had never seen before. For the first time in years, he felt something unusual, an opening in the wall of despair he had built around himself. And so, what began as just another walk through the market was about to change the course of his life forever. The words fell into the air like a stone thrown into a still pond. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again," the pauper boy said with a calm voice, almost as if he had rehearsed it 1,000 times in his heart. The busy market around them did not seem to care at first. But for the millionaire, those words sliced through the noise, silencing the shouts of vendors, the laughter of children, and the clatter of carts. For him, it was as if the entire world paused. The millionaire froze in disbelief. His breath caught in his throat, and his sharp eyes narrowed on the boy who dared to speak such impossible words. For a second, he thought his ears had deceived him. How could this boy, barefoot and dressed in torn clothes, Say something that even the most educated doctors and world-famous surgeons could not promise. He stood like a statue, his mind racing, his heart beating harder than usual. "Repeat what you just said," the millionaire demanded, his voice low and trembling with both anger and curiosity. The boy did not flinch. His small, tired face lifted, and with eyes burning with unusual confidence, he repeated slowly, "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." His voice carried no doubt, no hesitation. It was not the voice of a beggar asking for pity. It was the voice of someone who believed deeply in what he said. The crowd around them began to notice the strange scene. A few vendors leaned in closer, pretending to arrange their goods but eager to hear. Some passers-by slowed their steps, whispering to one another. Everyone in the town knew about the millionaire's daughter. Her condition was no secret. People had often spoken of the endless efforts he had made to cure her, the countless doctors he had brought from foreign countries, and the mountains of money he had spent. Yet nothing had changed. She remained bound to her chair, unable to take even a single step on her own. And now here stood a ragged boy, a pauper with nothing to his name, daring to claim what no genius of medicine had ever achieved. The millionaire felt anger boiling inside him. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "Do you think this is some kind of joke?" he snapped. His voice thundered so loudly that some of the onlookers stepped back. "Do you even know what you are saying? Do you realize the cruelty of such words? My daughter is not some experiment for your lies." Still the boy stood his ground. His small frame shook slightly, but his eyes did not lower. "It is not a joke, sir," he said softly but firmly. "I know your pain. I know your daughter cannot walk, and I know I can help her." The tone of his words stunned the millionaire. It was not arrogance, not a trickster's confidence. It was calm faith, like a person who had seen a truth others had missed. Inside the millionaire's heart there was a war. On one side, his mind screamed at him to ignore this nonsense, to walk away, to not waste another second on a child beggar. On the other side, his heart whispered, what if? What if this boy knew something others did not? What if, for once, hope could come from the most unexpected corner of life? But the weight of disappointment from the past years crushed that tiny flicker of hope. He remembered the hospitals, the machines, the treatments that promised miracles but delivered nothing. He remembered the nights he sat beside his daughter's bed, watching her cry quietly, hiding her face so he would not see her tears. He remembered all the men who claimed to heal her, only to leave with his money and his trust broken. The millionaire looked at the boy with fury. "Do you have any idea how many have promised me the same?" he shouted. "Do you know how many liars I have met? How many cheats I have paid? How many false hopes I have carried to my daughter? And now you, a boy with not even shoes on your feet, dare to claim you can do what they could not?" The boy's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of arrogance but of quiet certainty. "Yes," he said, "because I have lived what your daughter is living." Those words shook the millionaire more than anything else. For a brief second his anger loosened, replaced by a strange curiosity. The boy's voice carried something more than just words. It carried experience, pain, and truth. The market had grown still around them. All eyes were on the two. One man with wealth beyond measure and one boy with nothing but conviction. It was a moment that felt unreal, a clash of two worlds that should never have met. Yet here they stood, facing each other, both bound by the life of a girl who could not walk. The millionaire's chest rose and fell heavily. He wanted to dismiss the boy, to walk away, to shield himself from another heartbreak. But deep inside he could not. The boy's words had pierced his defenses. For the first time in years, the possibility of a miracle, however faint, flickered in his soul. And though he hated himself for it, he listened. The millionaire stood there staring at the boy, but his mind had already drifted far away. The boy's words had unlocked a door inside him, a door he kept tightly shut for years. Behind that door was his greatest wound, the one that no amount of money, power, or success could ever heal, the pain of his daughter's suffering. He remembered the day she was born. She was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. Her tiny fingers had wrapped around his thumb and tears of joy had filled his eyes. He had whispered promises into her ear, promises that he would give her the best life, protect her from every harm, and make sure she never lacked anything. At that moment, he believed that with his wealth, he could shield her from every sorrow the world had to offer. But life had a cruel way of teaching him that money was powerless against certain battles. As his daughter grew, it became clear that something was wrong. She struggled to stand, her little legs trembling, and when other children ran freely, she could only sit and watch. At first, the doctors told him it was nothing serious, just weakness that would fade with time. He believed them, clinging to every comforting word. But the truth soon unfolded like a nightmare. She could not walk. The millionaire had poured his entire heart into finding a cure. He brought specialists from across the country, then from across the world. Every new doctor brought hope, and every failure brought fresh heartbreak. Hospitals became like second homes, their white walls filled with empty promises. He spent millions on treatments, surgeries, medicines, therapies, but his daughter remained in her chair. He remembered how she would look at him with eyes full of questions. "Papa, when will I be able to play with my friends?" she once asked in her soft, innocent voice. He had smiled, hiding his pain, and told her soon, always soon. But deep inside, he knew the answer he was giving her was a lie he wished were true. At night, when the house was quiet, he would sit by her bed and watch her sleep. Sometimes she moved her hands in her dreams as if she were running, chasing something invisible, and when she woke, she would smile. But behind that smile, he could see the sadness she tried to hide from him. It broke him in ways nothing else could. The world saw him as a powerful man, respected and feared, with wealth that could bend reality. But in his own home, he was just a father crushed by helplessness. He could buy islands, mansions, cars, and jewels, but he could not buy his daughter the simple gift of walking. That truth burned him every single day, and the worst part was the pity. People never said it aloud, but he could feel it in their eyes. Whenever his daughter was wheeled into a gathering, there was silence, then whispers, then forced smiles. Their eyes carried sympathy, but to him it felt like knives stabbing his pride. He wanted the world to see his daughter as strong, not broken. Yet even he could not escape the reality. He had even prayed. A man who rarely bent his head to anything, who believed only in numbers and deals, had knelt in the quiet of temples and churches, begging for a miracle. He promised charity, he promised to build schools, hospitals, shelters, anything if only his little girl could stand. But every morning he saw her still in her chair, her small hands clutching the wheels to move around. The boy's words in the market had stirred all these memories at once, cutting him open. It was not just the sentence itself. It was the memory of every promise broken, every tear shed, every coin wasted on false hope. His pain was too big, too raw, too personal to allow another false claim into his life. And yet, there was something about the boy that unsettled him. The way he spoke, the way he stood, the fire in his eyes. It was not pity, not trickery, not greed. It was conviction. A conviction so strong that for a moment, against his will, the millionaire's heart trembled with something he had long buried, hope. He hated it. He hated that a poor boy in torn clothes could make him feel the one thing he had sworn never to feel again. Hope had only ever led him to heartbreak, and yet he could not turn away. His pain, though heavy, whispered to him that maybe, just maybe, the answer he had searched for so long could come from a place he least expected. The millionaire's chest tightened. He closed his eyes for a second, and in that silence, all he could see was his daughter's face, her laughter, her tears, her silent courage, and he knew, no matter how foolish it sounded, he could not ignore this boy. The marketplace buzzed around them, yet the millionaire could hear nothing but the echo of the boy's claim. His mind was a storm. On one side, the boy's confidence struck a strange chord within him. On the other side, years of betrayal, disappointment, and loss screamed inside his head. He clenched his fists, his veins visible under his skin, and his jaw tightened as anger began to rise like fire. "Do you know what you are saying?" he finally thundered, his voice slicing through the noise of the market. People nearby turned sharply, startled by the authority in his tone. A few merchants abandoned their stalls just to watch the scene unfold. "Do you think you can mock me? Do you think I will stand here and let a ragged beggar boy play games with my pain?" The boy did not move. His bare feet stood firmly on the dusty ground, his eyes never leaving the man's face. The millionaire's voice grew harsher. "I have brought doctors from across oceans, the best minds in medicine, men with more knowledge in one finger than you will ever hold in your entire life. And you, look at you." His hand gestured sharply at the boy's torn shirt and skinny frame. "You don't even have shoes, and yet you dare to speak about curing my daughter? Are you mad?" The crowd whispered louder now. Some pitied the boy, afraid he would be punished for speaking so boldly. Others were curious. What gave him the courage to speak this way to a man who could crush him with a single order? The millionaire's anger was not only at the boy, it was anger at life, at fate, at the countless lies he had swallowed before. He remembered one particular doctor, a foreign specialist who had promised miracles. He had charged an amount that could build 10 schools, and the millionaire had paid without a second thought. After months of painful treatments, the doctor finally admitted defeat, leaving his daughter weaker than before. The humiliation of that day burned inside him still. Now this boy stood before him, reopening that wound. His voice shook with rage. "Do you know how many frauds I have seen? Do you know how many men like you have stood before me, claiming they could do the impossible? And do you know what they gave me in return? Nothing but ashes. Empty words, false hope, and more pain for my child." For the first time, the boy's lips trembled slightly, but he did not back down. Instead, he stepped a little closer, his voice steady, though softer than the millionaire's roar. "I am not them, sir. I do not want your money. I do not want to trick you. I only want to help." The simplicity of those words unsettled the millionaire more than any argument could. He had expected begging, manipulation, or lies, but there was none. Just a strange calmness that made his anger burn hotter, because it clashed with the wall of doubt he had built around his heart. "You insult me with your words," the millionaire snapped again, his voice lower but sharper now, like a knife. "You insult my pain, my daughter's suffering, my years of struggle. I should have you dragged away from here for daring to speak like this." His guards, sensing his fury, stepped forward, ready to act. But then something unusual happened. The boy raised his hand, not in fear, but as if to say, "Wait." He looked straight at the millionaire, his small face glowing with an honesty that silenced even the guards. "I know you do not trust me. I know you hate my words, but I swear to you on my own life I speak the truth. I will not shame myself with lies. I only ask you to give me one chance. Just one." The market fell into a hush. Even the wind seemed to pause. The millionaire stared at the boy, his anger and his doubt colliding violently inside him. His pride screamed at him to crush this nonsense, to protect himself from more humiliation. But his heart, aching from years of pain, whispered something else. Could it be possible? Could a boy with nothing truly hold an answer? The millionaire shook his head hard, trying to clear the thoughts. His voice returned, harsh but quieter, almost as if he was speaking more to himself than to the boy. No, this cannot be. I will not be fooled again." Yet even as he said it, his anger felt weaker than before. It was still there, burning fiercely, but under it was a question he could not erase. What if he is different? What if? The boy lowered his hand, saying nothing more. His silence was not defeat, it was confidence. A kind of patience that unsettled the millionaire even more than his bold words had. And for the first time in many years, the man who thought he had seen it all felt something he had buried deep. The trembling of hope fighting its way through the cracks of anger and doubt. The millionaire's chest still heaved with anger, but inside him there was also a strange silence. He expected the boy to break down, to cry, to beg for forgiveness. Instead, the boy stood there calmly, as if the storm of harsh words had not touched him at all. His eyes were steady, almost glowing with an inner fire that no insult could put out. Finally, the boy spoke. His voice was softer now, but every word carried weight. "Sir, you think I am mocking you. You think I am like all the others who promised and failed. But I am not them. I do not come to you with books or medicines. I come to you with truth. Truth I know because I have lived it myself." The millionaire frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean? Lived it?" The boy took a deep breath, and for the first time, his gaze shifted away for a moment, as if reaching into a memory too heavy to carry. Then he lifted his chin again, facing the millionaire with the courage of someone who had nothing left to lose. "There was a time," the boy began, "when I could not walk either." The words hit like thunder. The crowd gasped. Even the millionaire's heart skipped a beat. His anger paused, replaced with something new. Curiosity, maybe even fear. The boy continued, his voice steady though his eyes glistened. "I was not born like this. When I was little, I could run and play like all the other children. But one day sickness struck me. My legs grew weak. Day by day they failed me until I could no longer stand. My parents tried everything. We were poor, but they begged and borrowed, hoping someone could cure me. But nothing worked. Soon they gave up. People in my village said I would never walk again. The boy's face tightened, but he pushed on. At first, I cried every day. I wanted to die. I thought my life was over. But one evening, when the pain was unbearable, I looked at the sky and prayed. I prayed not for food, not for riches, but for strength. I told myself, if no one can save me, then I will save myself. He paused, and the marketplace was so quiet that even the flutter of birds' wings could be heard. I began to fight my weakness, the boy continued. I dragged myself forward inch by inch, crawling on the ground. I forced my legs to move, though they felt like stones. People laughed at me, called me crazy, but I did not stop. Every day I tried. I fell hundreds of times. I cried in pain, but still I tried again. And slowly, very slowly, my legs answered me. First a twitch, then a step, then another. After years of struggle, after years of tears, I stood on my own 2 feet again. His eyes shone now, not with pride, but with faith. I learned something in that fight, sir. Sometimes healing does not come from money or medicines. Sometimes it comes from faith, courage, and never giving up. That is why I believe I can help your daughter. Not because I am special, but because I have lived her pain. I know the hopelessness that crushes her heart, and I know the fire that can light it again. I will not teach her only how to move her legs. I will teach her how to believe. The millionaire was silent, his eyes locked on the boy. His anger had melted, though his doubt still lingered. But there was something in the boy's words, something raw and undeniable. This was not a story invented for sympathy. It was the voice of someone who had walked through fire and returned alive. The boy stepped closer, lowering his voice but sharpening its strength. Sir, I do not ask you to trust me with your money. I ask you to trust me with your hope. Let me meet her. Let me speak to her. Give me one chance. If I fail, you will lose nothing because you already believe nothing is possible. But if I succeed, his voice trembled slightly and he finished with tears in his eyes. If I succeed, you will see your daughter walk into your arms. The millionaire's throat tightened. For years he had heard speeches from doctors filled with technical words, clever explanations, and endless bills. But this boy's words, simple, raw, honest, cut deeper than all of them. He looked at the boy's bare feet, scarred from the rough roads, and for the first time he saw not a beggar but a fighter. The crowd around them held its breath. Even the guards looked uncertain now. No one spoke because everyone could feel the truth in the boy's voice. The millionaire's heart battled against itself. Logic told him this was madness. Experience told him it was a trap. But his pain, his endless pain, whispered something else. This boy knows your daughter's pain better than any doctor ever could. And for the first time in many years, the wall around the millionaire's heart cracked. He did not speak yet, but in his silence there was something new, something fragile and dangerous. Hope. The millionaire stood silently, his heart a battlefield. On one side was doubt, sharp, cold, and built from years of disappointment. On the other side was the boy's voice, warm, raw, and alive with conviction. He could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to him with such honesty. Doctors had spoken with arrogance, priests with rehearsed words, relatives with pity. But this boy spoke like someone who had lived inside his daughter's pain. The crowd waited, every eye fixed on the two. Whispers spread like fire. Some thought the boy was brave. Others thought he was foolish, but none could deny the strange power in his words. The millionaire's guards looked uneasy, unsure whether to push the boy away or keep standing still. Even the vendors had stopped calling out, their baskets of fruit and spices abandoned as they leaned closer to witness what would happen next. Inside the millionaire, memories flooded once more. He thought of his daughter's laughter, her attempts to stay cheerful despite her weakness. He thought of the way she tried to hide her tears, not wanting to trouble him. He thought of all the times he had promised her, "One day you will walk," only to break his own heart again and again when nothing changed. And now here was this pauper boy. No degrees, no machines, no white coat. Just a story, a struggle, and an unshakable belief. The millionaire's pride resisted. What will people say if I trust a beggar? What if he fails? What if my daughter is hurt again? His mind screamed with these questions, but his heart whispered something else. You have tried everything. What do you have left to lose? At last he spoke. His voice was low, almost trembling, but firm enough for all to hear. If you are lying to me, boy, I will not forgive you. If you are playing with me, I will destroy you. Do you understand? The boy did not flinch. He nodded. I understand, sir. And I am not lying. The millionaire's eyes darkened, but there was also a flicker of something fragile, something he had buried long ago. Then you will come with me, he said at last. Gasps erupted from the crowd. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. The boy's face remained calm, though his heart pounded in his chest. He had won the first battle, not against the millionaire's anger but against his hopelessness. The walk back to the mansion was heavy with silence. The millionaire's polished shoes tapped against the stone path, while the boy's bare feet carried dust with each step. The guards followed behind, their hands never far from their weapons, ready in case this turned out to be a trick. People in the street stared, some in disbelief, others in awe. A beggar boy walking beside the richest man in the city. It was a sight no one would forget. Inside the mansion, the air was different. Expensive carpets muffled their footsteps. Golden chandeliers sparkled above, and servants bowed deeply as the master returned. Yet despite the grandeur, the boy's eyes searched for only one thing, and then he saw her. In a wide sunlit room sat a young girl in a wheelchair. She looked fragile, her body thin from years of weakness, but her face shone with innocence. She held a book in her lap, though her eyes were distant as if lost in thoughts too heavy for her age. When she looked up and saw her father, she smiled, a smile of love but also of sadness. The millionaire's heart tightened. He went to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My child," he said softly, "I have brought someone to see you." The girl's eyes shifted to the boy. At first she was puzzled. She had seen many men brought before her, doctors with polished shoes, priests with sacred books, healers with strange herbs. But never had her father brought a boy like this, barefoot, poor, his clothes worn thin. "Who is he?" she asked curiously. The millionaire hesitated. His pride made it hard to say the words. But at last he admitted, "He says he can help you walk again." The girl's eyes widened, then dimmed quickly. She looked down at her hands. "Papa." Many people have said that before. Her voice was soft, tired. The voice of someone too young to carry such disappointment. The millionaire felt his throat close. But before he could speak, the boy stepped forward. His eyes met the girl's, not with pity, but with recognition. "I know what you are thinking," the boy said gently. "You do not believe me. You are tired of promises. You do not want another lie. I understand. Because once I was you." The girl blinked, surprised. "You?" The boy nodded. "Yes, once I too could not walk. I know how heavy that pain feels. I know what it is like to see others run while you cannot move. I know what it is like to cry when no one is watching. But I also know that if you do not give up, if you fight, if you believe, miracles can happen. I'm standing here as proof of that." The girl stared at him, her lips parting slightly. For the first time in a long while, her eyes showed something other than sadness. They showed a spark of curiosity, maybe even hope. The millionaire watched silently, his chest tight. He had taken the risk. He had let this boy in. And though doubt still gnawed at him, for the first time in years, he saw his daughter's eyes shine with something new. It was only a beginning. But beginnings were powerful. And as the boy knelt before the girl, promising to stay by her side, the millionaire knew this was no longer about money, pride, or status. It was about a chance, a fragile, dangerous, precious chance that could change everything. The boy's first day in the mansion was unlike anything he had ever known. He had slept under the open sky, on cold pavements and hard ground, but now he found himself inside a house filled with gold frames, silk curtains, and chandeliers that glowed like tiny suns. Yet none of that dazzled him. His eyes were fixed only on the girl in the wheelchair, the daughter of the millionaire, the one whose pain reflected his own past. At first she was shy. She looked at him with suspicion, unsure whether to trust this strange boy her father had brought home. She had seen healers before. They had made promises, given her bitter medicines, tied charms around her arms, and whispered words of hope. But all had left her in the same chair. To her, the boy was no different, but the boy did not speak like the others. He did not say, "I will cure you today." He did not hand her any magic potion or claim instant results. Instead, he sat down on the floor in front of her, so that his eyes were level with hers, and said quietly, "Do you want to try with me?" The word surprised her. No one had ever asked her that before. Everyone told her what they would do for her. But this boy wanted her to join him. She hesitated, then whispered, What if I fail? The boy smiled gently. Then we will try again, and again, and again, until we don't fail. And so the journey began. The first days were painful. The boy asked her to move her legs ever so slightly, to press her toes against the ground, to hold the arm of the chair and push with whatever strength she had. Each attempt was followed by failure. Sometimes she could not even feel her legs. Sometimes her body trembled so much that tears filled her eyes. The pain was not only in her limbs, it was in her heart. She had lived too long with failure, and trying again felt like reopening an old wound. The millionaire often watched from the doorway, his heart breaking every time he saw his daughter cry. He wanted to rush in, to tell the boy to stop, to protect her from more disappointment. But every time he opened his mouth, he saw the boy's face, calm, patient, and filled with determination. That look stopped him. It was the same look he had seen only once before, in his own mirror years ago when he had built his empire from nothing. The boy carried that same fire, and it gave the millionaire just enough courage to stay silent. Days turned into weeks. The boy pushed the girl, but never too far. He spoke to her, told her stories of his own struggle, made her laugh when she wanted to give up, and wiped her tears when frustration overcame her. Slowly, something inside her began to change. One afternoon, while the sun poured golden light into the room, the boy asked her to place her feet firmly on the ground. She looked at him with fear. "I can't," she said. "You can," he replied softly. "Not because your legs are strong, but because your heart is." With trembling effort, she pressed her feet down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, ever so slightly, her legs responded. Her toes curled against the carpet. Her ankles stiffened and her knees shook. It was barely movement, almost invisible, but it was there. The girl gasped. The millionaire, who had been watching silently from the corner, covered his mouth with his hand. He had seen the finest doctors try and fail to achieve even this small reaction. Yet this boy had done it with nothing but patience and faith. The boy smiled, but not with surprise. "You see, your legs are not dead. They are only asleep, and together we will wake them up." From that day, the girl's spirit lifted. She still cried, still struggled, still fell more often than she succeeded. But now, every time she failed, she looked at the boy's eyes and saw no judgment, only encouragement. And so she tried again. The mansion, once silent with sorrow, began to echo with new sounds. The sound of her laughter when she managed a small victory, the sound of her father's choked sobs as he watched from afar, and the sound of hope returning to a house that had forgotten what it felt like. The boy's methods were strange. Sometimes he asked her to close her eyes and imagine herself walking across a field of flowers. Sometimes he sang softly to distract her from the pain. Sometimes he told her to grip his hand tightly, as if pulling strength from him into herself. He was not a doctor, not a healer. He was something more. He was a mirror showing her what she could become. Weeks passed and small steps turned into bigger ones. First, she lifted her legs without falling. Then, with the boy's support, she stood for a few seconds. Her face glowed with tears and joy, and her father nearly collapsed in disbelief. The turning point had arrived. The impossible was no longer impossible. The millionaire, who had once frozen in the market at the boy's bold claim, now froze again. But this time not in anger or doubt, but in awe. He realized then that the boy's power was not magic. It was not wealth or medicine. It was faith. Faith that had been born in suffering, grown in struggle, and now given freely to his daughter. For the first time in years, the mansion was no longer a palace of sorrow. It was a house where a miracle was quietly unfolding, one painful step at a time. The morning of the miracle began like any other. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the mansion, painting the marble floor with golden streaks. The servants moved quietly, carrying trays of food, cleaning the halls, and whispering about the strange boy who had now become part of their master's household. For weeks they had watched him work with the girl, day after day, patient, relentless, never giving up. Some believed he was wasting his time. Others secretly began to hope. In her room, the young girl sat in her wheelchair, her hands resting on her lap. Her face was different now. The sadness that once lived in her eyes had given way to a spark, a small flame that grew brighter each day. She looked stronger not in her body but in her spirit. She no longer spoke of giving up. She no longer cried in silence. She now said words her father thought he would never hear from her lips. "Let's try again." The boy entered the room that morning with the same calm determination he carried every day. His clothes were still poor, his feet still bare, but his presence filled the room with a strength money could not buy. He looked at her and smiled. "Today," he said softly, "we go further." The millionaire stood near the door, his heart pounding. He had grown used to watching in silence, never interfering, though every moment tore him apart. Each time his daughter stumbled, he felt the urge to rush forward and catch her, to protect her from pain. But he had learned to hold back, to trust the boy's strange methods. Today, however, his nerves were sharper than ever. Something inside him told him this day would be different. The boy gently helped the girl to her feet. Her legs trembled violently, but she gripped his hands firmly. Her eyes filled with courage. "Remember," the boy whispered, "your legs are not weak. They are only waiting for you to believe in them. Do not fear falling. Falling means you are trying." She nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. Slowly, with the boy's support, she took a step, then another. Her knees buckled, and for a moment it seemed she would collapse, but the boy steadied her. "Breathe," he reminded her. "One step at a time." The girl's father gripped the doorframe so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breath caught in his throat as he watched his daughter, his little girl who had never walked a single step on her own, begin to move. Minutes felt like hours. The boy guided her carefully across the carpet. Every step was a battle, her face red with effort, sweat dripping from her forehead. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of determination. And then it happened. The boy slowly loosened his grip. At first she leaned heavily on him, afraid to let go, but he whispered, "Trust yourself. You are stronger than you know." She hesitated. Her legs shook. The millionaire held his breath. The entire room seemed frozen in time, and then she let go. For a heartbeat, it looked as though she would fall, but her legs held her. Unsteady, trembling, yet firm enough to keep her upright. She took a step forward without support, then another. Her arms reached out, and with a cry that shook the very walls of the mansion, she walked. The millionaire's eyes filled with tears. He stumbled forward, unable to control himself, and fell to his knees as his daughter moved toward him. His heart pounded wildly, breaking every chain of sorrow that had bound it for years. "Papa," she cried, her voice breaking with joy. He stretched out his arms, sobbing openly, no longer the proud, untouchable man the world knew, but simply a father overwhelmed by a miracle. She collapsed into his embrace, and he held her tightly, weeping into her hair. Around them, servants gasped and covered their mouths. Some fell to their knees, whispering prayers of gratitude. Even the guards, hardened and expressionless, wiped their eyes. The mansion, once a place of quiet despair, now thundered with the sound of joy. The boy stood silently, watching the reunion with a faint smile. He did not step forward to claim credit, did not ask for praise or reward. His heart swelled with quiet pride, but he knew this was not his victory, it was hers. She had fought. She had believed. She had risen. The millionaire, holding his daughter tightly, finally looked up at the boy. His face was wet with tears, his voice shaking with emotion. You have given me what the world could not. You have given me my daughter's steps. Tell me, how can I ever repay you?" The boy lowered his eyes humbly. "I do not want your riches, sir. I only want one thing, that you never forget what happened today. Remember that miracles do not always come from wealth or power. Sometimes they come from faith, from struggle, from the smallest flame of hope." The millionaire's lips trembled. He rose, still holding his daughter's hand, and walked toward the boy. For the first time in his life, he bowed his head. Not to a king, not to a priest, not to another wealthy man, but to a pauper boy who had changed his world. "You are no beggar," he whispered. "You are a blessing." The boy smiled, his eyes glistening. "No, sir. Your daughter is the blessing. She always was. She just needed to see it for herself." And in that moment, the mansion glowed not with gold or jewels, but with something far greater: faith, love, and the miracle of a child's first steps into freedom. The world outside would soon hear of it. People would speak of the pauper boy and the millionaire's daughter, of the day wealth bowed before faith, of the miracle that proved nothing is impossible when courage and hope walk together. But for the father and daughter, it was not just a story. It was life. It was love. It was the miracle they would carry in their hearts forever.